I'm watching the ice build up on the wing, snow and ice bang against the fuselage. We're not going to have a gear that works when we get to Brussels. Ukrainian Airline ceases operations.
Jeff Stearns, connected through cars. If they're bigwigs, we'll have them on the show. And yes, we'll talk about cars and everything else. Here he is now, Jeff Stearns.
I had to fly into Kiev from Brussels. I think it was Ukrainian Air, right? Blue and yellow tail. I think it's Ukrainian Airlines, yeah. And they were hesitant. I remember when I had to book the ticket, Brussels said, we're not sure if they're flying. I'm like, oh, that's not good at all. That's just not good. But I needed to get there. So I think it was a Friday night flight at a Saturday morning meeting. I flew in. I was in the back of the plane. It was the worst meal ever. I mean, it was hot, mind you, that they somehow were able to heat the food up, but then they wrapped it in this shell of aluminum that just was scary to open. And I remember landing. The flight crew was nice, but the plane was rough, really rough. And it snowed over the weekend, flying back out on a Sunday night. And I'm looking at the airport. I have my private license, so I like aviation, and I always like to understand the weather and what's going on and what's not going on. And I didn't see a de-icing crew, which was a first indication that there might be a problem. And I also didn't see plow trucks plowing the runway. And the snow was building up, but I did see a snowbank at the end of the runway. So get on the plane, I'm waiting for the de-ice, no de-ice. I'm watching the ice build up on the wing. It's not so bad, or I would have got off the plane, but it was questionable. We line up on the runway, there's no wind. Of course, he's got the runway heading, which is bringing us right towards the end of the runway where the snowbanks and pine trees are. And that's recipe for problem. And this guy, I would have done a short field takeoff. He barely got off the ground. And by the time we got to the end of the runway, the gear blasted through the snowbank. We were probably 6 feet off the ground. I mean, he should have been 100, 200 feet in the air by then, but he used all the runway to gain altitude. I don't know what he did wrong. Obviously, we had a full plane, probably heavy on fuel. Temperature wasn't a problem because it was cold, so your air density is great, but we plowed through the runway, the gear's down, of course, because you're low altitude, and snow and ice bang against the fuselage. So now I'm thinking, we're not going to have a gear that works when we get to Brussels. Sure enough, gear goes up. They circle a little bit because the gear wasn't indicating that it was green when they were ready to land in Brussels. We finally get down. We land in Brussels, get off the plane. Next day, Ukrainian Airline ceases operations into Brussels. They were shut down.
This has been Jeff Stearns, connected through cars.